Hello, my beautiful people, and welcome to yet another episode of the Up Level Together podcast. I am so incredibly excited, and not surprisingly, we have yet another fabulous guest. And I think that I've told her a million times already, I'm so honored that you're here. Lauren Bennett McGinty is the governor-appointed executive director of Explore Minnesota, which is the state's tourism department for state's tourism promotion. And just really quickly for everyone watching, I'm going to say what the Explore Minnesota is. The mission statement. It's an agency dedicated to growing the state's economy through tourism, talent attraction, and economic development and marketing. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm again so honored, very excited because I have lived here for 24 years and I love this. I'm like Minnesotan. You wouldn't even think that I was born in Europe. This is my home, my state. I'm such a proud Minnesotan. But Minnesota is not exactly known as the top destination in the world. So I'm really curious, just for you, is like what that moment for coming into this position. This was an appointed position, one of the few in the state. Do you remember, I'm curious, getting that call and then what that felt like?
Yes, of course. I think it was a Sunday morning about 11 a.m. And he called me up and said, "Hi, Lauren, this is Governor Tim Walz." And I think I froze. I remember taking the call. He offered me the position and I said yes, and then hung up and thought, I don't know if that was real. I don't know if I was dreaming, but it was definitely something very special. And I had only met him once before then. And so to know that I made it through the interview process and that the confidence from him and his team was there to appoint me into that position was really special.
So did you expect the call? Were you told, like, be on a standby, you might be getting a call? Like, how does that even work? How does that process work?
No, I was not expecting the call. I remember the process took quite a long time. For good reason. You know, you're appointing somebody to an agency with a large budget, large responsibility, and especially now that I've been on the state side for a while, hiring people, I know how long it can take. But I had kind of been in the process for several months, and at that point, I was convinced that I didn't get it. I was sort of thinking, okay, well, they've obviously gone with someone else, and they're giving them the job, so that's why it's taking so long. And so, no, nobody gave me a heads up. It just was sort of a call out of the blue, which is why I didn't think it was real in the first place.
And you know to pick it up. Normally, I do not answer phone calls, especially on a weekend. And you just knew to pick it up.
I did. I normally would not have answered that, but for some reason, I was just like, that's weird. Who would call me at 11 a.m.?
Isn't that interesting? Remember how when the Vice President Kamala Harris called him, I think he missed the call or something like that. I'm like, that's not a call you want to miss,
No.
Right? Oh, well, congratulations. You've been in this position for a number of years, and clearly, based on and everyone raving about you, which is why you're on the show. One of I think we're interviewing our greats. You've done an incredible job. And I think it's such a beautiful, for me, beautiful role because we get to showcase how really wonderful the people and how people are in Minnesota and how wonderful our state is. But I have to tell you, like when I was reading a little bit more, I'm like, wait a minute, people come to Minnesota for vacation. So people actually we are an actual destination for people all over the world. Please enlighten us.
Well, I think you kind of said it too when you said you love Minnesota and people would never guess that you weren't from here, right? And I think there's something so special about Minnesota, and whether it's our cultural experiences that we have. I mean, we were just talking about Anna Med and her incredible food, right? And that story of her coming here and being an immigrant and being able to kind of bring people into her world is so amazing. And it's sort of these stories I don't have to try that hard to tell. And I think beyond that, this sort of simple, in a very good way, and sort of humble culture that we have here, people want to feel at home when they travel, believe it or not. When you go somewhere, you want to feel somewhat comfortable. Mm-hmm. There are those people who don't, and that's okay too. But we are a destination for people who kind of just want an ease, an affordability, a family-friendly experience. And that is what Minnesota is. We can kind of offer so many different things to so many different people.
It's really true. It's interesting. I have a number of chefs coming on the show. James Beard nominees and fashion influencers and incredible, well-known politicians. Like we have so much to offer. It's kind of incredible, and I think it's because maybe we're under the radar, or maybe a little bit of an underdog. But we really do have so much to offer, from food to wine to beautiful nature and the arts. It really is remarkable. So, how many people come to Minnesota?
So we've had over 80 million. We're getting closer to 90 million every year. So that number continues to grow, which is great because that means that we're sort of getting on people's radar a little bit more. And then they bring nearly $25 billion in economic impact. And so that's from staying in hotels. It's from, renting bikes. It's from being at restaurants in small towns. It's from all of these people sort of coming and experiencing life in Minnesota and contributing to, honestly, more than 185,000 jobs. And it's just a big network that kind of all works together to welcome people here.
That's a staggering. I'm $25 billion. I mean, that's a big number. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you track that?
Lots of different ways. We work with people who are much smarter than I am, I will say. Economists who sort of track, if you're coming from a certain distance from here, different things like cell phone data, but also spend and sort of where those spends are coming from. Credit cards come from out of state, right? And so you can better track that. And so it's a lot of things that go into it that I will not pretend that I know all of the very finite points, but there are several different ways we can do that. We also then cross-reference our advertising too. So we take surveys of people who have seen it and how they react to it. And, it's things like corresponding to visits at the Mall of America or number of visitors through Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, right? So it's all these different factors that go into calculating how many people
it's a
come.
Science.
Yes.
It's incredible. So Explore Minnesota, does it only focus I don't think so, but I'm just going to ask because I want to be very clear. It doesn't really focus on people coming from other states or other countries, but it's also for Minnesotans to explore other parts of Minnesota.
Yes,
correct?
Absolutely. So obviously our core focus, because if you're growing the economy in any way, you have to bring in people who are not from here, because otherwise, I always say your money sort of just moves around the state.
Yeah.
But we also cater pretty significantly to local destinations around the state too, and we support them through grant programs or discounted advertising programs. So a lot of times it won't be Explore Minnesota at the forefront. It'll be those specific places like Detroit Lakes or Duluth or Rochester or wherever, and they get to be the forefront, and we kind of help support that financially in the background. And so it's really exciting to see their stories come to life and get them to kind of come out of the woodwork. One of my favorite slogans in the past few years has been Winona, who is the Miami of Minnesota, which is I love so much. It's so creative
Who came
and
up
silly.
with that?
It's just okay, sure.
Let's go.
And it stands out, and people are curious, and so I think it's really fun to just see how they're all telling their own story and trying to stand out, and we're here to help elevate that.
Oh, I really, really love that. It's going to be such an interesting conversation, I think, for everyone listening, because we're talking about something that we don't often talk about, but we either participate in or, are recipient of. So I'm just really, really excited. Well, when you were appointed in 2021, you came into a really difficult situation right after COVID. That must have been really difficult. So I've learned that state has lost, what was it, $16 billion in revenue? I mean, that was just really hard. I'm curious for you and, your team, how did you handle that level of difficulty at the time?
Yeah, so I came from the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild, and so those are small businesses, breweries across the state. I worked really closely too with some cideries and distilleries, and so hearing the impact on these businesses that truly relied on people coming in person to be able to survive. I worked as closely as I could with them. I worked with the state, and a lot of it is sort of out of your hands, right? It's sort of the elevation of public health and safety over other pieces for the good of the greater good, right? And I think coming into this position, I felt really well poised and experienced, unfortunately, to be able to take on that bigger challenge for the entire state. And I think the biggest challenge was, now that we're sort of at the end of 2021, we're going into 22, things were starting to loosen up, restrictions weren't all there as much. But there was this general fear of people not sure how to experience life again. The great outdoors was amazing for us, but then you also had to push, like, please go grocery shopping at your local grocer, or if you can, get carry out, right? And so it was all these experiences where you had to sort of let people know, we're here when you're ready. But travel is this sort of really truly innate thing that everybody wants to do in some form or another, whether you want to go away for a night somewhere or you want to do a family road trip. It's one of those really resilient industries because it's kind of something that people need in their lives. They don't need to spend a lot of money to do it. You can go camping at a state park, right, and get a meal and cook all your meals over a stove. But I think it's this really special thing that bounces back because people need it and they desire it deep in their hearts. And I think as we started to come out of 2021, you heard that more, but it still was that fear of, we don't really know what's out there, but we need it and we want to experience more of it.
Oh, you're so right. You know, we just came back from camping in Lanesboro and sleeping under the stars. And my sister said, "But yeah," I'm like, "Well, had so much work to do." And she's like, "You look at it this way: you're changing drapes inside of your home. You're changing a tapestry, and it's a different perspective." I'm reminded of Sufi poet Rumi, who said, "Travel and you shall find meaning of things." There's almost something akin to spiritual experience when we get away and experience things through a different lens. So I think you're doing God's work in many ways. Did you ever feel like this is too much, or did you ever feel like, "Yeah, I'm carrying so much on my shoulders and no one knows that"?
I think most leaders, whether it was in honestly any industry at that time, truly felt that. I think there was such an overwhelming sense, especially as a public servant too, of responsibility for everybody's lives. How can I drive people to your business so that you can stay in business? How can we make sure that when people are doing that, they're staying healthy and they're staying safe? And I don't take all that on myself clearly, but I think to be able to constantly be reassuring other people is a really difficult place to be. But I also think what kind of moved me through a lot of that was knowing that it wasn't even about me. I think I took on the angst of what that was like and the pressure, but I think I did it because I knew that there were other people who needed that. And I feel like that sounds kind of privileged and not very humble, but I do feel like when you become a public servant, there's something that you figure out very quickly, and it's that you really have to like what you do, and you really have to support the vision and the mission of your state agency or the state or, the governor or whatever that looks like to you. But for me, it was kind of like, okay, I'm in this now and we're going to do it. And it's a team of people and we're all working hard. And so there was a lot of pressure. There still is always a lot of pressure. But I think part of it is just knowing that it's not just about me, right? And I'm not just here by myself. And so I think that that's what makes it a little bit easier to do.
Well, no surprise. That's what all great leaders say. Yeah, I was telling you, I'm very excited about doing a series with the greats, the people who uplift economies, communities, businesses. And very often they're unsung heroes because they're in the backgrounds doing the work unselfishly. And I really want you to know that as a form of having you here, we really want to celebrate you, and I hope that you get enough thanks for all the service that you give, because public service is, man, it's a thankless job very often. It really is. Do you ever face criticism?
Oh gosh, I think yes. I think it's really interesting. I very much applaud all the public servants who have been doing the job for so long, because I think there is a level of things that don't change. There are, for good reason, in my opinion, very specific protocols and processes that you have to do. Things might take a little bit longer, but there is this level of joy you get when you get to see the work that you do out in the world for everybody else. And so I think you sort of get used to putting yourself in the background because you get to see like how excited people get. And I'm doing the most fun part of it, right? I get to put out commercials about Minnesota. But there are a lot of people who do things, whether Department of Health or housing or whatever that looks like, who are working on, applications and improving them, or they're trying to make sure that the grant goes out on time and that everything's reconciled. And so I think one of the core things that make it okay to receive complaints, if you will, is that we're here for those people. We're here to hear from them and understand what their needs are. And sometimes you can't implement what they're asking for. But in the end, doing as much as you can for the most amount of people is what's really important. And so I always take it as, okay, they're presenting us with this. Maybe it's a city that says, oh, we haven't been featured in a while. That's a very common one that we get.
Of course.
Yes. And so those types of things are like, how can we do this? It doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're going to put them in this commercial, because maybe it's not feasible at this time, but can we do more on social media? Can we give them tools so that they can promote it through our website? What does that look like? And so I think more of it is, how are we doing the best that we can to help support them? And sometimes, like I said, it's not the easiest answer. And sometimes people can say things in a way that's not very nice, right? But it's coming from a place of frustration, and they need help, and they're reaching out. And so I think, having been in a job where I have put myself in that position many times over, of hearing those pieces of feedback, you kind of get used to, like, this isn't about me personally. It's about where they're coming from, and they just want to do the best for themselves and their communities too. So how can I help, right? And that's kind of, I think, what being a public servant is all about.
Well, you're positioning it so beautifully. I mean, you're like, this is conflict resolution 101, and how to negotiate and how to actually listen properly. And you do that, the way you've explained it. No matter what kind of role we have, we're going to be faced with criticism. And that's such a beautiful thing that you just said. And again, not a surprise from a public servant, and clearly a really beautiful soul, but it's not always easy. And what I found is that people in leadership positions like this can often have such positions of my way or the highway. So I think that's why we're doing so incredibly well. So thank you for that. I'm excited. I meant to ask you the role that you have, and I think you mentioned this earlier when we were chatting. In order to when you're coming in, you wouldn't be in this position if you weren't some great visionary. We know that. What ideas, did you come in with into this position? And I was listening to some of the conversations and reading a few articles, and you said that you're like, yes, Minnesota will be everyone's bucket list, top 10 state. I'm like, okay, Lauren, let's talk about that. and we all laugh, but actually you're very close to achieving that.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about Minnesota too, again, I think it's this level of humility and sort of a protective layer we put over ourselves, because I think most of us know that it's a really special place, and we kind of don't want other people to know about. We both need other people to come here, support our economy, whether it's visiting or moving or starting a business here. But we also are like, maybe don't do that, right? And so I did come in with that vision. And I think more than anything, it wasn't about how do we measure, how are we going to compete with California or New York? But it was sort of, how do we talk about ourselves with confidence? And how do we make sure people understand that coming to Minnesota for a vacation means that you can have a city vacation and go to all the sports games you could possibly imagine. It means that you can have an adventurous vacation and go to the Boundary Waters. It means that you can learn and understand the history of the native people here, or the cultural communities that have migrated here over time. And I think I looked at kind of the full palette of things that we offer and thought, well, this sounds like a great place to visit. Why don't we legitimately just give ourselves a little boost of confidence and make other people feel that energy and understand that they could experience what we get to experience every day, what we're so lucky to experience every single day. So I did come in with that. I think as times change, the vision of that change, and really it's just kind of, we're top 10 in a lot of things. Minnesota is the least stressed state, which I love to talk about.
In the entire U.S., we're the least? No.
Yes.
I love it.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know.
What else?
Minneapolis is one of the happiest cities in the U.S.
Well, the ranking just came in. What
Yes.
is it, top 30 in the world?
Yes.
Okay. I have a
Yes.
question about that. Follow-up
Yes.
question.
We have 2 of the top 5 best park systems in the United States. I mean, really, like one of the best state. I think we are technically the best state for healthcare. The list kind of goes on. And so as you started diving into these things, and we actually really didn't start looking at them significantly until we started doing more workforce attraction marketing. But to really say, these are all the things that we benefit from or that we experience here. And I think pulling that out and saying, as a tourist, you can also experience that, but also you can be among people who are very happy to be here and living that life. I think that was it. That was sort of the moment where I realized, like, we just need to be talking about our quality of life as a place to visit, as a place to live. Because when I go somewhere and I see the people there are really happy, it totally changes my perspective of how I experience that place.
It's so true. What do you love the most about Minnesota?
Oh my gosh. That's such a tough question. I mean, for me, it's sort of the simple things. I think the ease of being able to get in a car and go somewhere within a few hours, and it's a completely different place than somewhere that's, oh, sorry.
Yep.
That's a few hours away, right? One of the most interesting things in this last week, actually, is we at the state do formal government-to-government tribal consultations. And so I was at the Upper and Lower Sioux bands and then went to Mille Lacs, and there are 2 different tribes, or sorry, 3 different tribes, but also the natural beauty around them is different. The drive to each one is different. And it's just this sort of experience that, gosh, we just have all these different components to offer. But I also live in Minneapolis, and I can go to a Twins or a Lynx game. And I also, one of my favorite things to do in the summer, maybe not this summer if it ever stops raining, but I live right by Lake Nokomis, and I can take my paddleboard out on the weekends or on an evening when it's beautiful out with my husband, and we just sit out there and like look at the city from the lake. And it's kind of this strange world that we live in, where you have that juxtaposition of this sort of quiet, calm, natural beauty around you, but bustling with like innovation and ingenuity and just entrepreneurship. And it's just such a unique experience to be a part of all of that.
Yeah, you know, the way you're describing it is how I felt for a very long time. When I first came here, I wanted to run away because I just didn't get it. And it was, I wanted to go to California or New York, of course, that everyone who comes from, I think, abroad, that's the idea or the ideal. And Minnesota is everything that I have ever wanted and needed, which is so interesting. It's like I am such a dedicated Minnesotan, but it's the simple things. And it's the beauty that's really all around us. But most of it, Lauren, it's the people. I have never felt so welcomed and loved, I think, anywhere else. And I think it's almost like the best kept secret. So my question for you is, how do you market that to people from California, to people from Florida, Texas? What have you found that resonates the most in terms of, inviting people to come to Minnesota?
Well, I love that question, actually, because it is just that. It's inviting people, right? I think the world of tourism commercials or, ads, whatever you kind of do in that space has really started to transform, because you look at things a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and it was all this sort of cookie cutter, like, here's a snapshot of this famous place and this famous place, and wouldn't you like to experience this, and the end of commercial. And now what I was so proud of, and of course it takes a whole team, but I think really the vision of it came together in 2023 was we wanted to bring people here who had never been here before and experience everything for the first time. And the joy that they had was just something that you can't make up or manufacture. You can't just hire an actor and say, okay, tell us what it feels like to be here for the first time, because there's no way to do that if you've already seen it. And so, bringing people to the State Fair for the first time or the North Shore, and to have them literally say unscripted, wow, it's like an ocean. Those are the special moments that have truly connected with so many people. And we saw the likability of our ads go way up after we started doing that. on the livability and talent attraction side, one thing that I really wanted to do is find people who had just moved here within the last 5 to 10 years to tell their story, because I think
They are the best,
yes,
the best
yes. And
testimonials.
I mean, even somebody who has been here longer, but to hear that transformation of sort of, I think there's probably a healthy level of skepticism when you move to any new place, but especially Minnesota, where you're like, okay, well, maybe it's summer, but then also you have to do winter. And you also don't know a lot about it, right? When you first move to Minnesota, you kind of, it is a sleeper state. We don't talk about ourselves a lot. So you're kind of like, I think it's okay. I've read a few good things. How do I, make this work for me? But those stories were so impactful, even on me, who I'm like, I have been here since the age of 4. Like, I love it here. But to hear stories of one of the people, he brought his whole family here. They had moved around. They are immigrants, and they settled here. And to hear him talk about the community that they built for his son, who has a learning disability, to be able to feel connected and involved in a place and just outside of St. Cloud, or to hear about actually 2 different ones that we did with people who moved from Miami and the Bahamas to stay here for as long
in
as
Minnesota.
they have. Yes. And so it's sort of like there's got to be something more special if you're going to be willing to move from the Bahamas to Minnesota and like stick around for a while.
For sure, but it is the people. I've always thought the weather has to be the main factor in deciding where you live, because winters can be absolutely brutal. But what I've discovered, if you figure out how to dress properly and find things, I have 2 boys, so we're constantly out. And we're snowshoeing, we're cross country skiing, there's always something to do. And then it becomes, and the idea of us being outdoorsy people, do you think that that's why we're not as, stressed?
Probably.
Because we're so, and it is peaceful. I remember being in LA recently, and I was in the car for 2.5 hours on my way to the airport, and I missed my flight. And normally I have 15-minute drive, from Edina really quickly off to the airport. There's very, very, except for 62, there's not much traffic. We're really lucky in those ways. It really does matter.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. The ease of things, like the less stress that you experience, the higher quality of life is. I mean, I think it's wrong to say there's not more work to do. I think we have, whether it's in state government or just people as a whole, have a lot of work to do and kind of recognizing, who has privilege and who does not. And I very much sit with that and learned a lot about that in this job. But I think even in spaces where people are more civically minded, and it creates opportunities for other people who might not have everything that person has, or to be in a place that sort of supports one another. Like you said, you felt welcomed and supported when you came here. And I think that those are the good stories to tell. And those are the things that I think keep people coming here and keep people staying here. Because we know through data and research that people might not be actively trying to come here regularly, but if they do come here, they stay.
They stick around.
They stay.
This is going to be one long commercial for Minnesota.
I know, great.
It's like, love that. I really love talking about this because it is so unrepresented. And I'm just glad to hear that we have such a beautiful leader at the helm who can actually promoted. At the same time, I'm like, I don't know if I want that many more people in Minnesota. It's like, maybe it's a good thing that we stay on the down low, so to speak. But I'm curious, in terms of right now with the advent of social media in the last 5 years, the virality and algorithms, has that helped at all with people coming to see Minnesota, or having the beauty of Minnesota come into their feed, especially with the beautiful ads that you're creating? I've noticed that you're unbelievably creative with the content. So I'm curious, like, what do you know of the impact of that?
Yeah, well, I can't take full credit. We have an incredible team that works on our social media and our website. They do such a good job, so much passion there too, and excitement. But I do think it's helped, obviously. I think being able to find those moments, even last year when the Timberwolves made the playoffs, that was a viral moment for us, that we were kind of all like oh my gosh, did Anthony Edwards just invite everybody? I don't need to say it, but did he invite everybody to come to Minnesota? Did he just tell Shaquille O'Neal he needs to bring his butt here? And we sort of created the meme that took off around the state and the country. And it was just like, there was so many components of that that were amazing. The first was that everyone's like, Minnesota's cool. That's weird, right? And we were like, yeah, we're cool. We don't talk about it that much, right? But also the other part of it that I love so much is that my team, it was almost like this incredible just kind of explosion of energy and excitement about it. It's like, how can we do this? Who can we pull in? What can we do with the destinations around us? How can we, talk with Dallas? Because we were playing Dallas at the time. We're like, how can we have a friendly feud? And it was all of these different things that came together to just sort of to see. I think it was sort of a little snapshot of Minnesota as a whole to see my team be super excited about it, because we in Minnesota, I think something good happens that we are wanting to share with everybody else, and everyone just gets this buzz and excitement and joy. And so that moment and social media in general has really been helpful for us, because we have such a creative team that puts out really fantastic content. But even more so, I think the people of Minnesota are so good at like getting hyped about it too.
Sure. That's right.
Which helps create, even if it's a viral moment just in Minnesota, we'll take it.
That's so true. I love hearing that, because it feels like you're utilizing all of the tools in 2025 to promote it. I have a question for you. One of our recent guests was Nick Engblom, who is on the board of prepping for the Special Olympics next year coming in. I'm assuming that that's going to be a really big event for the state of Minnesota, because it's, I mean, I don't know if we ever hosted Special Olympics in Minnesota.
Oh, I don't know. I want to say we have, but I'm not 100% sure. But I do know that is going to be huge for us. I'm really excited. That team has been working on it for years. We've been in talks with them over the past several years, just as they're trying to get funding at the Capitol. But very excited about that. I think, again, that sort of speaks to the welcoming spirit of Minnesota. We have this newer tradition, if I will, of bringing in sort of bigger events that focus on not necessarily the hot stars of those sports or what have you. So one of the missions of Minnesota Sports and Events, and they brought in the U.S. women's gymnastics Olympic trial. Oh, actually, the U.S. gymnastics trials. But they have brought in several women's sports, and they want to really support women's sports and be the home for that here. And so, again, I think it speaks to the ideals of Minnesota. It's like, we're a little different, we're a little unique, but we want to celebrate the people that make us special and people that make the world special. And so I think Special Olympics is a great example of that, because they, like I said, they've been working really hard to bring it here, and it's going to be really fun to just see it come
I think so
together.
too. I was telling Nick, I've signed up my entire family to volunteer, because they're like, "What can we do?" Because like we need help. So we're going to be doing a bunch of promotion as part of the Rise to More, which I'm so excited about, because I don't think we think about, okay, it's actually the GDP of the state. It is all our roads. All of these things that are happening make our city, our state, so much more exciting, the quality of life better, a richer state, better for everyone overall. And I think we really need to hear that over and over again. It's not just let's just make Minnesota cool. It's so much deeper than that. And I think you're talking about good quality of life. We could do that even better with all of these adventures and the things that are happening. For a visionary like yourself, I'm curious. What's the highest expression of your role? The big dream that you might be even afraid to say out loud, because I know top 10 destination, but where do you see all of this going in the next 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, I think really trying to be on the front end of the sort of marketing space for destinations specifically. I think there is this level of experience that when somebody comes to one of those big destinations, they expect to have. But I love the idea of us being unexpected. However, in the next 10 years, I would like it to be somewhat more expected. I would like
Okay.
people to know us and recognize us, and not to have it be so hard to say Minnesota is interesting and unique and special. Um, and I know that's probably going to make people upset who live here. I will say too, my brother at one point was like, "I don't think I want more people living here," and I said, "That's literally my job." So thank you. But I think in 10 years, if we really could have that national, international recognition of people thinking like Minnesota is on the map, we want to go there. It is a destination worth traveling to. I think that is something special. And I think you're starting to get that now. I think there's a lot of things in the last several years that have really piqued people's interest about us, but more of it is how do we sort of tell those stories better? How do we elevate the really special parts of ourselves that we just don't talk about very often. I just read a really incredible article in the New York Times about Hmong food in Minnesota. And it was talking about Yia Vang and Diane Mua, and it was just so interesting because I know their stories. I've met Yia before. He's such a great guy. But to see it written down in a paper like the New York Times, it was like,
It's a big
yes,
deal.
yes, thank you. This is what we're talking about, right?
It's starting to happen. I'm curious, did Governor Walz and his visibility in terms of elections, did that bring attention to Minnesota as a state?
Yes. And so I always like to talk about it. Tourism, in my opinion, is nonpartisan. I think
Of course.
travel can be something for everyone. And frankly, I don't love the idea of making it political in any way.
Couldn't agree more.
But what I will say is that, whether you like the governor or not, it did really bring a lot of positive attention to Minnesota, because I think one of the great things that he did on the campaign trail was to talk about all those top reasons that people live here and stay here. And that was a really fun thing. And our team too, because we've been saying that on our websites and whatever, but to hear him spouting off all those top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, I think people were like, oh, really? And you could see on Reddit or you could see on Google certain terms spiking and based on what he was saying. And so I think more than anything, he's just talking about Minnesota on a national platform or international platform. And to be able to sort of like see that happen in real time was really fun. And again, it had nothing to necessarily do with the politics. It was more just people curious.
It's just awareness, and that's precisely it. It's a dormant state. Again, we don't like to talk about ourselves, but I'm so glad we have you at the helm of marketing, because that is the whole goal. On this show we talk very often the series of meeting with the greats. In order to have the job that you do, the role that you have, I know at this point that it comes from within. There's a lot of inner work and a lot of dreaming and scheming internally. You have to be highly coherent to be able to do this. How do you personally work on yourself to be healthy, to be highly coherent, resonant, so that you can be a vessel for these incredible ideas and to bring them into fruition?
Oh, that's such a deep question. I think in the last probably I would say probably my whole professional career, now that I say it out loud, but I've learned a lot about myself, but more about the people around me and what it means to sort of react to the people around you and how to do it in a way that is appropriate and respectful. I think one of the best mentors I've had and has now become a friend is an old boss I had a few jobs ago. And she was always she was very thoughtful and considerate, but did give critical feedback and did sort of, teach me that like sometimes it's hard to do your job and sometimes you are going to get feedback, but to be able to kind of learn as you go and have that grace is really something special. And I think as we went through COVID and in this job where I'm sort of beholden to a lot of different stakeholders, whether it's the staff or it's other state agencies or it's the constituents of the state and the people who pay taxes, I've learned along the way a lot about different cultures and experiences, which is something I truly didn't know as deeply before this job. And so I think for me, it's humility in myself and understanding and recognizing my place and privilege, but also to be able to sort of understand reactions to people when they're upset. That was something that, for the first few times that you get feedback in an aggressive way, it can be really challenging and you can feel like you did something wrong. And I think if you step back and you take a minute to understand where they're coming from, I had people during pandemic say they were so mad at me because I couldn't remove the masking requirement and I couldn't reopen their business, and how dare I, right? And when you sort of started to peel it back, he was like, I'm gonna lose my business. I have so much money invested. It's gonna hurt my family. And so it's that piece where I always, and I'm sometimes, for better or worse, an empath, and I try really hard to be like, what is their perspective? How are they coming at this? So if somebody makes a mistake or I make a mistake and somebody is upset about something, I try to just take at least a minute to say, why are they upset? What is not clear about what I'm saying, or what is not clear about what we're doing? And it's still something I learn every single day. It's not perfect. It probably never will be. But I think I've really, truly, in the last several years, learned and understood that more, that I used to be a person who is like, I want to get all the things done. I want to wear all the hats. And now I'm a person who spends more time listening and understanding perspective. And really, I think that came about being a public servant, because there are stories out there that we haven't heard and that probably people don't want to hear because they're really difficult. And I think I learned that from the people around me. One person that I very much look up to and admire is the Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. And she has such a interesting story and background, but she is so good at listening to people and engaging with them. And I admire people who can just take a minute and think about what those other people might be feeling to be able to make their decision and have their response. And so I do try to do that regularly. And then, of course, from a mental state, I spend a lot of time with my husband, spend a lot of time outside if I can, and, working out and relaxing as best as possible. But I think for the work side of things, and honestly, in my real life too, it is just listening and understanding. And then because I kind of am in sales, I think it's how do you reiterate what you're thinking in a way that you think might resonate with them.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is really interesting that's happened in the last several years is that my parents, who have maybe more traditionally been moderate or Republican, have sort of become more interested in the work that I'm doing at the state and more understanding of the different facets of the world around them. And it's been really fascinating to have conversations with them now, because they're like, we're learning from you and we're hearing how things work and how things function within government. And again, I don't think things need to be political, but more of it is the ability to sort of have those open conversations with them that's not in a threatening manner, and to kind of try to do that in as many situations as possible with people.
Gosh, Lauren, that's an art. And it is, I feel like it's becoming a forgotten art. One of the things that I have observed, and there's a tendency just to polarize immediately, and we've seen it recently, we see it every single day. So where does that come from for you? Because that is an art of a stateswoman, of someone who might lead nations one day. We might revisit this. I might be projecting something really wonderful, but do you consciously work at that?
I do. I mean, I think the world is really polarizing, and honestly, it can be really exhausting. For me, I have my opinions, and they can be fairly staunch sometimes. But I think the other piece of it is trying to literally, when something happens that I don't agree with, I literally say, the first thing that's out of my mouth is typically why. Why does that person feel that way? What about this situation makes them feel that way? And do they have all the facts, or do they understand? And facts, I think part of that is facts can be polarizing too, right? And so. Or real or unreal. But I think we continue to live in a space where, unfortunately, that polarization has also impacted the way we work together and the way people interact on just kind of your everyday average basis. Like, sometimes I think that sort of push and pull of, politics was sort of meant for, you always hear about, oh, I don't want to go to Thanksgiving because of my uncle, or whatever it is, right? But now I think it's starting to sort of solidify itself in the way people work together. And it's become, how do I talk about things for the greater good? If somebody doesn't like the way I'm doing something, which happens plenty, it's how do I explain the rationale is it's not about Lauren sitting here doing this thing. It's about I made the decision to do that because it helps this many more people or it benefits this many more communities. And so I really try to do that from a perspective that level sets between people. Every day I have to work with legislators who are on both sides of the aisle. This year, when we had a split house, there was no like pitting sides against each other. You really truly had to talk to Republicans, talk to Democrats, and they had to agree on things. And I think what made it easy for me to come in is that every single Republican or Democrat I talked to, I was like, tourism benefits your communities
No matter
no
what.
matter what.
Yeah.
So I looked at every single one of them and said every person on this committee has received a grant in one of their communities that's benefited them. Every person in this committee has a restaurant or a grocery store, an ice cream shop on their corner that is benefiting from tourism. And I think when you level set and put it at a place where literally everyone can understand the basics and they can sort of pull out away from their politics and see the impact to their neighbor or their family or their friends, that's where we can find that common ground. And that's why I love travel and tourism, because it is so much more about, we all want to experience the same joy. We all want that.
It's so true.
We want to go somewhere and try something new, and we want to be with our families or our friends and have great memories. And so like that's where you have to have those conversations and try to just, what is the one thing we can agree on, and then go from there. And it's not necessarily about changing minds. I mean, there are minds like in my family that I'm never going to change, but lo and behold, they come to me and they're like, gosh, your job is super cool. And they want to talk about that. And
there's something that we can find commonality in. I want to take a moment and really tell you how beautiful it is to hear you say that. You do know that it's rare, even in the positions that you're in publicly appointed positions, and it is. I want to thank you because I'm inspired by you. I have very strong beliefs, and it's been an incredible exercise the last few years to be very, not to change your own beliefs, but to be receptive to others who are very disruptive in how they share theirs. So I really want to thank you because I'm having a moment here where it's like, okay, this is the kind of person you need to look up to and aspire to, because we need more people like Lauren. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's such a beautiful thing. You must feel that from everyone around you.
That's really very sweet. I think I don't typically talk a lot about that. I think for me, talking about, I guess, my personal philosophy on how to have conversations with people or how to feel empathy for what they might be going through is something that I sort of just do unconsciously. And so I think being able to talk about it, but maybe being able to at least whoever's watching this figure out like, okay, well, maybe it's better to start on whatever common ground. Like maybe you both like chocolate ice cream, go from there, right?
The basics. Well, bless you for saying that. And I think that that's for everyone listening. This is a conversation that we have to keep on having because it really matters. It always matters. I have a question for you. What does rise to more mean to you?
Oh, I think for me, so I'm fairly young for my position. I'm reminded of that very frequently. And I've always been fairly young to be in a leadership position. And I think that there is this level of angst people have when they see a leader in this position, just to be like, gosh, I don't know if they can do it, especially a young woman. I think I will always be in a position where I have to sort of defend myself. But to me, rise to more means like, you can think that about me. You can think I'm not prepared or I don't have enough experience, which I think is a relative term. But for me, moving into leadership positions, I never balked at it and I never questioned it. It was always something I had passion to do, whether it was student council in high school or an RA in college. I think it was always something that I felt like I want to be in a position where I can help and coordinate. It wasn't so much about I want power, but it was just I felt like I could be supportive of other people. Um, and so I think Rise to More is moving up and above what those expectations are, whether they're positive or negative expectations, and proving people wrong a little bit. I do, like I said, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, but I think in a good way that really fuels me to say, no, I am going to continue to do this work. You can not like me or like me, but I think that that passion and that excitement that I have every day really carries me through. And some days are really hard, but a lot of days are just so much fun and so great to see people get excited about their jobs. And so for me, it's just rising above and beyond what some of those negative perceptions are.
Well, you are an absolute delight. And it's a one thing to watch someone from afar, watch them on television, read articles about them, and it's a completely different thing to sit across from someone. I'm a really big heart-to-heart person, so watching your smile, your demeanor, you really care. And that shows. And I just feel so, again, it's so funny. I feel so honored that you said yes and so blessed to have a conversation with, I think, someone who is doing my language, God's work, where you're doing incredible service to the community that is selfless. And also now having gotten to know you a little bit, the level of heart and the commitment and the integrity and how you approach your work and dedication to public service, it's really awe-inspiring. And I want to be a little bit more like you, Lauren.
Thank you. That's
Thank
so
you so
sweet.
much for coming on the podcast, for talking about yourself and about Explore Minnesota. My last question to you is, I always want to make sure with people who listen to the podcast are so smart, creative, and they're really willing to contribute and rise to more, of course. What can we do if we're here in Minnesota, not in Minnesota, to support your work so that we could really, is it to share the things, the content materials, the promotional materials that you put so much work into, or is it to invite other people? I'm curious, like, are there specifics that we can as individuals do?
I think it's all of those
Okay.
things. It's one thing too that I continue to do in this job, and I still have so much more to explore in Minnesota. But I think it's going out yourself and experience something new. Try a new weekend trip or whatever that looks like, but then kind of become an advocate for that with other people. So if you really enjoyed, for example, like you just said, you went camping in Lanesboro. I love that. We just shot some biking in Lanesboro. They have
It's
fantastic trails.
incredible. I watched that.
Yeah, and so share that with others and advocate for those places because they need people to come. But I think then too, invite your friends, invite your family from other states, and they might be skeptical, and that's okay. But I think prove them wrong is always what I like to say. Pleasantly surprise them, and then yeah, sharing things and promoting things. We have so much great content on our website that takes a true village and a team of people to pull together, and I think it's fun to go out and just hear the stories of others who are here, or read fantastic little snippets about whether it's a list of the best burgers in Minnesota, or it's we have what we call the Stars of the North series, where we have a few different local Minnesotans who have really made their lives here and what Minnesota means to them. I love that. And I love when people kind of get excited about that and share their own. And even like commenting on our social media posts, sometimes we'll put, what's your favorite place to see a summer movie or something,
So
right? Yeah,
engagement.
engaging.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not much of a social media person, but I promise that I will make it an effort. I'll put it in my note for my team and I to go ahead and do that because I'm really proud to be living here. And I'm just so grateful that someone like you is in this role. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your heart, and I wish you the best of luck in the next 10 years in really making us the bucket list state. So
Thank you.
thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.